Picture this, it's 1989, and you're holding a gray brick that weighs nearly as much as a hardcover book. The screen is a murky greenish color that can only display 4 shades of gray. Your friends are laughing at you because they have sleek handheld devices with full color displays. But here's the twist, that gray brick you're holding, it's about to change gaming forever, outsell every competitor, and become one of the most successful consumer electronics products in history. This is the story of how Nintendo's Game Boy didn't just win the handheld wars, it wrote the rule book that everyone else would follow for decades. Before we dive into the Game Boy's incredible journey, we need to understand the world it was born into. The 1980s were a wild time for video games. Nintendo had already saved the entire gaming industry from collapse with the Nintendo Entertainment System. But company president Hiroshi Yamauchi knew something important. The future wasn't just in living rooms, it was in pockets, on buses, and in the backseat of family road trips. Handheld gaming wasn't a new concept. Nintendo had already experimented with the Game & Watch series, those compact single game devices that sold over 43 million units worldwide. The man behind those devices was Gunpei Yokoi, a brilliant engineer who would become the father of the Game Boy. But Yokoi had a vision that went far beyond simple LCD games. He wanted to create something revolutionary, a true portable gaming system that could play multiple games, just like a home console. Here's where things get interesting. While competitors were racing to create the most technologically advanced handhelds possible, Yokoi was following a completely different philosophy he called lateral thinking with withered technology. Instead of using cutting-edge components that would drain batteries and inflate costs, Yokoi wanted to use mature, reliable technology in creative ways. This wasn't about having the best specs on paper, it was about creating the best experience in the real world. The development of the Game Boy began in 1987. Yokoi assembled a small team at Nintendo Research and Development 1, the same department that had created the Game & Watch line. They faced enormous challenges from the start. Battery technology in the late 1980s was primitive compared to today. Color screens consumed massive amounts of power. Processing capabilities were limited. And perhaps most importantly, the device needed to be affordable for families. Yokoi made several crucial decisions that would define the Game Boy's identity. First, the screen would be monochrome, using a reflective LCD display that didn't require a backlight. This single choice would give the Game Boy extraordinary battery life, up to 30 hours on 4A batteries. Second, the processor would be relatively simple, a modified Zilog Z80 running at just 4.9 MHz. Third, the casing would be durable, built to survive drops, throws, and the general chaos of being carried everywhere by enthusiastic kids. But here's what separated Nintendo from everyone else. They understood that hardware was only half the equation. The real magic was in the games. And Nintendo had an ace up their sleeve that nobody else could match: Tetris. The story of how Tetris came to the Game Boy is legendary in gaming circles. Hank Rogers, a game designer, and Robert Stein were locked in intense negotiations with the Soviet government for the handheld rights to Tetris. Nintendo of America President Minoru Arakawa recognized that Tetris was the perfect showcase for the Game Boy. The puzzle game was simple enough for anyone to understand, addictive enough to play for hours, and didn't require colored graphics to be enjoyable. After complex negotiations that involved literal trips to Soviet Russia during the Cold War, Nintendo secured the rights. April 21, 1989, marked the Game Boy's launch in Japan. The initial reception was positive, but not explosive. The real test would come 4 months later when it launched in North America on July 31, 1989, with a retail price of $89.99. Nintendo's marketing was brilliant. They didn't try to hide the Game Boy's limitations, they celebrated its strengths. The advertising emphasized the massive game library that would be available, the incredible battery life, and the ability to play anywhere, anytime. The bundling of Tetris with the Game Boy in most markets was a masterstroke. Tetris became a cultural phenomenon, transcending gaming to become something played by everyone from hardcore gamers to business professionals on their commutes. The Game Boy sold over 1 million units in the United States in just the first few weeks. By Christmas 1989, it was the hottest toy in the world, with stores struggling to keep units in stock. But Nintendo's real genius wasn't just in creating a great product, it was in defending it against an onslaught of competitors who thought they could do better. And trust me, the competition came hard and fast. In 1990, Atari launched the Lynx, a technologically superior handheld with a full-color backlit screen, stereo sound, and more processing power. On paper, it destroyed the Game Boy. Sega followed with the Game Gear in 1991, another color handheld with impressive specs and the backing of Sega's popular game franchises. NEC released the Turbo Express, a handheld that could actually play full TurboGrafx 16 games. All of these devices made the Game Boy look like a toy from the Stone Age. So what happened? They all failed to dethrone the Game Boy. Why? Let's break it down. The Atari Lynx, despite its beautiful color screen, consumed batteries like a hungry monster. Players were lucky to get 4 to 5 hours of gameplay, and it required 6 AA batteries. The price was also significantly higher, at $179.99. The game library never materialized in the way Atari hoped. The Lynx sold approximately 3 million units total before being discontinued. The Sega Game Gear had similar problems. Yes, it had a gorgeous color screen and could play Master System games through an adapter, but it ate 6 batteries in just 3 to 5 hours. At $149.99, it was also significantly more expensive than the Game Boy. Despite Sega's marketing muscle and decent game library, the Game Gear sold around 11 million units, a respectable number, but nowhere close to threatening Nintendo's dominance. Meanwhile, the Game Boy just kept selling. By the end of 1990, it had sold over 12 million units worldwide. The library of games was growing exponentially, and Nintendo had something none of the competitors could replicate: Pokémon. The release of Pokémon Red and Green in Japan in 1996, followed by the international release of Pokémon Red and Blue in 1998, didn't just boost Game Boy sales, it created a second life for a device that was nearly a decade old. Pokémon became a global phenomenon, selling millions of copies and driving Game Boy sales to unprecedented heights. Kids who had never owned a Game Boy suddenly needed one to trade Pokémon with their friends. The link cable, a simple accessory that allowed 2 Game Boys to connect, became an essential part of the Pokémon experience. Nintendo also showed remarkable discipline in how they evolved the Game Boy. In 1996, they released the Game Boy Pocket, a smaller, lighter version that ran on 2 AA batteries. In 1998, they released the Game Boy Color, which added color to the equation but maintained backward compatibility with the entire original Game Boy library. This meant that the hundreds of games released over nearly a decade weren't made obsolete. Parents and kids didn't have to choose between their old games and new technology, they could have both. The numbers tell an incredible story. By the time the original Game Boy line was finally retired in 2003, it had sold over 118 million units worldwide, making it one of the best-selling gaming devices of all time. The software library included over 1,000 games. It had survived and defeated at least a dozen competitors, all of which had superior technology on paper. But what made the Game Boy truly revolutionary wasn't just its commercial success, it was how it changed the industry's understanding of what mattered in gaming. The Game Boy proved that gameplay trumped graphics. It proved that battery life and portability were more important than technical specifications. It proved that a strong software library could overcome any hardware disadvantage. And perhaps most importantly, it proved that understanding your audience was more valuable than impressing them with technology, for how to innovate in a world obsessed with specs and features. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is not chase the cutting edge, but instead use proven technology in creative ways to solve real problems for real people. The Nintendo Game Boy's story is a reminder that in technology, as in life, success isn't always about having the best tools, it's about knowing how to use them. That gray brick from 1989 changed gaming forever, not despite its limitations, but because its creators understood what really mattered. If you enjoyed this deep dive into gaming history and want more stories about the devices, games, and people who shaped the industry we love, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a comment below telling us about your favorite Game Boy memory or what retro gaming topic you'd like us to cover next. And if you really want to support the channel, Share this video with a friend who loves gaming history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.